It was quite astonishing, the outpouring of affection that she received on Friday. I mean, universally, not only from Met officers, but from a lot of senior officers in charge of other forces. I've never quite seen that affection and respect shown for any police officer. It was astonishing. Now, that's fine, of course. If you've worked with or under Cressida Dick and you respect her, then fine, of course, we live in a free country. Heap the praise upon her. But for me, that casts a bit of a concern, because this slavish, blind loyalty to the person who's been in charge of the Met, when there have been so many scandalous incidents that have happened on her watch, for me, cuts to a deeper problem within policing, which is a refusal to look in the mirror and accept their wrongdoing.
So what is going wrong in one sense? Is it a case that they've been recruiting the wrong people?
Well,
as simple as that.
Quite possibly. We know there's been a recruitment drive to get an additional 20,000 police officers into the UK police forces. Of course, driven by the fact that so many were lost during a decade of austerity. Now, have they lowered the bar in order to hit that target? Because the Prime Minister's been very vocal about getting 20,000 officers in. Possibly. I know there have been problems over vetting, and in the Met they've recruited a lot of people to try and deal with that and resolve it. Are there concerns about training? Yes, there are. It's not like back in my day, and I get it that I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but you spent 16 weeks at Hendon at the old training school there, being very much immersed in the entire kind of culture, from shining your boots, pressing your trousers, into the levels of behaviour that should be adopted. Of course, it wasn't a perfect world, and a lot of wrong ones crept through in those days, like they clearly have done today.
We should be able to stop wrong-uns getting through, though, nowadays, shouldn't we? I mean, they should have sharpened up their act. We've known about this for some time.
One would like to think so, because problems in policing are as old as the hills, and you would like to think that in a modern workplace those matters could be addressed. Sadly, there have been so many quite frankly ghastly incidents of officers being arrested, from the horrors of the Sarah Everard murder through to only 2 weeks ago, when more officers were arrested in separate incidents for offences of a very sexualised nature, which is deeply, deeply concerning.
Yeah, I mean, you go from those horror stories through to just simple bad policing. You think of the Sarah Everard protest. Appalling policing of that protest. Or it wasn't a protest, it was a vigil, wasn't it? And, I mean, who's to blame for that? The blame has to land with the boss, doesn't it?
Ultimately, yeah, the buck stops somewhere, and I think the drip, drip, drip feed of such catastrophic news stories about the Met is eventually what led to the London Mayor Sadiq Khan almost setting a trap for Cressida Dick, which she couldn't avoid, and which ultimately led to her resignation.
What about these calls that we mentioned in our introduction to Mark's VT? You know, the messages and they're called misogynistic and homophobic and racist, and there are people, I've heard people say, well, is this not just letting off steam? Is this not just a bit of banter?
I had the huge misfortune to read almost all of those messages, and they have no place in wider society, in any workplace.
Or that bad?
Let alone amongst those who we trust to keep us safe, to protect us, to operate to a higher level of behaviour than we have to. And that's part of the deal when you join the police. You have to accept that you are going to be held to account, and your standards, quite rightly, should be higher than the average man or woman in the street.
Does all this mean that whoever comes in as a replacement, they're going to have to bring in absolute root and branch reform in the Met?
To a certain extent, yes, because there clearly has been a problem about culture and standards. And, of course, Baroness Casey is currently conducting her inquiry into exactly that. I think when the findings are produced, whoever is the new commissioner, they are going to have to say quite obviously, we will take these on board and these will be incorporated into our everyday practices.
Are these problems unique to the Met? And is it because the Met is so big? I mean, you do hear problems with other police forces, but it's always the Met that we hear about most. Is that fair?
It is the Met by and large. Of course, there is wrongdoing amongst other police services, but nothing of the scale and the worrying nature of what we've seen in the Met. Yes, of course, it is the biggest, so it will have a higher percentage
So is it too big?
Than others. No, I don't think so. I think it's set up and structured to be kind of managed on a local basis. But clearly, I think there's been failings in that regard, because the most important rank in the police is the sergeant, because he controls the constables, of which there are most of those in any police service. And I think there are so many problems with regards to the lack of experience, because so many people have bailed out when the pension conditions were changed dramatically and not for the better. I think because of the training, the vetting, the recruiting, and all of these things need to be looked at very much in the round, and somebody come in, new broom, establish a culture and a set of standards which everybody wants to buy into. And where people are not afraid to call out the wrongdoing of others.
Look, we're out of time, Peter. I just want to ask you very quickly. This is all very unfair on those police officers watching now, or the families of police officers who know they are good people doing a good and difficult job.
And that is why it is so important to get it right, not only for the public, but for the good uns. And the overwhelming majority of police officers are indeed good, fine, upstanding members of society doing an incredibly difficult job in very challenging circumstances.
Peter Bleksley, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.